Stop. 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 Had enough? Kick out mucus and quiet the cough with Mucinex 12-Hour DM for long-lasting cough and chest congestion relief. Buy Mucinex 12-Hour DM at your local retailer. Use as directed.
This episode is brought to you by the Weather Channel. The key to solving any mystery? Smart decisions based on the facts. In the case of the weather's effect on your well-being, turn to the Weather Channel app. It clues you in on how weather shapes your mood, health, and productivity, with insights built on reliable forecast data to help you thrive. Because mystery belongs in true crime, not weather. Be a force of nature with the Weather Channel app.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. The holidays are here, and you know what that means? It's time to get your friends and family the gifts they deserve. Take the stress out of shopping with Amazon's great deals and low prices on a huge range of items from toys to tech and much more. Whoever you're gifting for, Amazon has great prices on everything you need this holiday season. Shop early holiday deals now.
Want to listen ad-free and get to know Natalie and me a little bit better? Make sure to subscribe on Patreon, Apple Podcasts, or search The Murder Diaries ad-free on Spotify. For $2.99 a month, subscribers get to listen to our special journal entry episodes, which is basically like a window view of one of Natalie and I's phone calls twice a month. And you get to listen to every single episode ad-free. We thank all of our listeners who are already subscribed so much. And if you've been considering it, don't wait any longer. Head over to patreon.com, Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, or search The Murder Diaries ad-free on Spotify.
Welcome to The Murder Diaries. Today, we have a remarkable guest, Allyn Amerongen, who's here to share her journey of survival and healing after experiencing narcissistic abuse. Allyn's story is one of resilience and hope, and we're honored to hear about her experiences and the lessons she learned along the way. Now, here's Allyn.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I just have to say, I've done kind of a few shows now, but I haven't done one where someone's done an intro with me. That just kind of made me tear up a little bit. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so sweet. Like, you hear them back, but
I figured you might as well know what we're going to say, right?
I know, but I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys are going to make me tear up already. Which, great intro for myself. So yes, Allyn Amerongen, mental health advocate, domestic violence advocate, coach is my background. I've done a lot of chronic illness coaching, mental health coaching, and podcast host of When Heaven Meets Hell, which is sharing my story with this whole experience. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure, but that is me in a little nutshell.
I'm curious. I know we're going to get into your story in just a minute, but
yeah.
I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about your life before this significant relationship. What was your path like? I imagine it's a little bit different now because you weren't podcasting. Maybe you weren't so focused on the mental health aspect of it. So where were you at? And then I guess we'll go into your story and find out how you ended up here.
Yeah. So I was not podcasting prior to this. I've always kind of been, not always, but probably the last 5-ish years, been in the online space, I guess. That's when I started my online coaching business. My personal background, something that I've struggled with a lot is chronic illness. That's been really prevalent in my life ever since I was really young. I have just wrestled with that, and that is a whole beast of its own. But that just shaped me in all ways possible. And so coming out of college, I had, I went the traditional career route and everything, but always knew that this was heavy on my heart. And how do I take what I've learned and something that is me to my core and day in and day out that I'm working on and living with and help people with it? I started to kind of make a shift. I was like, do I write a book? I don't even know if podcast honestly was on my mind. But somehow I just kind of morphed into doing an online course at that time. It was kind of right around COVID. And somehow this kind of happened, this fell in my lap. And so I started doing things that way. And that business kind of took off and had a really awesome community of women. So just kind of coming on and helping them with their chronic illness journey. I guess from there, things kind of took off in the online space. And so I feel like that was kind of my intro to it. I ended up leaving my job in event planning and kind of went full time in the online space doing that. And then over time, it just kind of grew and grew. My demographic shifted a little bit in 2022. I did do a podcast with a friend. It was called Love That For Us. And it was just kind of a fun banter back and forth, something for us to kind of have an outlet and express. It was kind of around entrepreneurship and just being in business and trying to kind of like navigate your way and all that stuff. But it didn't have a direct focus. So we kind of had, I think maybe 30 episodes or something. And then she got married and I kind of went a different way. And we're still great friends, but it definitely is not at all anything that I'm creating now with When Heaven Meets Hell, obviously, which is a drastically different show. So yeah, when prior to this experience happening, I was just working on kind of revamping my courses and doing some new launches and redirecting my business in that way, and then entering, this whole experience. But prior, that's kind of where I was at and working on things and just passionate about helping women in their lives with whatever challenges they were facing.
It really sounds like the universe set you up to give you the tools that you would need to help you through this. And you just didn't know it until it happened.
No, didn't know it. Also, didn't want it, obviously.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, regardless of people's, beliefs in higher power, spirit, universe, whatever, I have wrestled with that a ton throughout this experience and journey. But at the end of it and kind of where I'm at now, I can look back and say, I feel like there has been such a through line throughout it, even prior to this happening. But I mean, way long before it, to where, to your point of just thing after thing that has set me up to be able to carry myself through it. And even in times when I felt like I couldn't or absolutely could not see my way through darkness and stuff like that, that there were tools or coping mechanisms or things that I knew how to survive with my body or mind or get through things that I feel like had I just been thrown into it, not having kind of gone through things prior, it would have been not a lot harder. I mean, it is as crappy as it gets, but yeah, I feel like there was a through line in it, which helps me and has kind of brought me through in a unique way. So a weird gift in it all, I guess.
The universe really just doesn't make mistakes, and it's hard to say that because it's not to trivialize anyone's experience, especially yours, as we speak to you about yours. But hindsight is always so wild when you look at what the universe provides and what the different consequences in your life are. And the universe really said, hey, here's your tool belt. We're going to give it to you because it's going to suck. But you're going to come out on the other side, and whatever it brings and continues to bring in your life, there's your why. And also, we're going to give you another podcast. So, okay.
I know.
And I also thought that was pretty amazing. Just the experience of initiating a podcast, getting it out there. Literally, these little things all helped you get to where you're at now. So it's just incredible. But
yeah,
let's start
with chapter 1.
Right. So how did you meet your ex-boyfriend and what drew you to him initially?
Yeah. So we met on Bumble, good old dating app match. I was out in his home state at the time. So this was overall, the relationship was long distance. We were together a lot. There was tons of traveling, but I had been out there in this line of work. I could be remote and I just wanted kind of a little change up. And I was interested in that area where he lived in Montana. And so I went out there for a good month and was kind of traveling around. And towards the end of that time, we matched on Bumble. I initially swiped no. And I mean, yeah, you just cannot make that up.
The irony is not lost. What do you feel kind of gave you that sense of, I'm going to swipe no this time?
Yeah. So I have always had kind of an idea of like what I was looking for. I was dating for a relationship. This was not me looking for a quick anything. I mean, I was looking for like a very serious relationship, which I know sounds counterintuitive on the apps, but I also came from event planning where some of my couples started coming in and they're like, oh, we met on Hinge or Bumble or Tinder. And I was like, oh, so it is possible. So my frame of reference kind of started to change and like, maybe this isn't totally crap, but I was looking for certain things when I was going through profiles, like, basic stuff. Can I see your face? Like, are you not just in a group of people? Is it not just photos of like your car and dogs and nature and you holding a fish? Are there actually like, does it look like you are showing yourself kind of,
I'm giggling because that is such a thing. The fish photos.
Mm-hmm.
What is with the fish photos? Why are we holding up a dead fish? It's weird.
I don't know. But they're out there for sure, And so I kind of had this little, and my friends were like, Allyn, you go through profiles fast. And I said, you guys, like, at this point, what's meant to be is meant to be. Like, if I swipe left on, or, no on my person, like, I think they will come back if they're meant to be in my life. But I just remember I came across it and it initially didn't have that many photos. It didn't really have I don't even know if it had a bio, maybe like one line or something. And I just was kind of like, no, I couldn't really tell. And I just felt like there's more out there. It was teetering and I just was like, Allyn, no. So I swiped no. Profile came back around the next day and it had more photos and more in the bio. And I have said this in my show too. Like, I don't understand. I don't know anything about how any of that works, algorithm or anything. In my mind, like, once you swipe no, you should be done with that. I don't know.
Do we feel like that was a second profile that just had more info on it? Or do we know for sure that it just happened to have gotten updated in those? I think you said it was just like the next day.
I cannot confirm. I do know that there were multiple profiles. I mean, I now know that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say which it was.
Could have been either situation, sounds like.
Yeah. In my mind, I was just like, oh, it looks the exact same. It's the exact same everything. I never thought of that.
Yeah, this is all hindsight. You wouldn't have thought right away when you see it again. You're like, oh, wow.
No.
They updated it. You're not going to think, oh, it's the second one. Maybe now one might after they hear your story.
Yes, after you hear it. I mean, but in my mind, I just, you have to go through a lot to have a second. I don't even still now, I'm like, to have a second, you need a double number, double phone number, double email, maybe. I'd have to think through what exactly you need to have a second one because
I didn't even think about that. But yeah, it's a lot of extra work for sure.
Yeah, which I mean, that all came to light later and found out all of that. Yes, he came up again and I swiped yes, and it was a match. And I just am kind of like that. I say that that's kind of the swipe that changed everything. He was charming. He was charismatic. He was kind and interesting and interested. He was all the things I hadn't found or had in other conversations in terms of reciprocating, which sounds like the bar is so low. But I think a lot of times in online dating, it was kind of very like one way, or you talk for a little bit and then it would stop, or it was very sexualized sometimes, or I felt like it was a breath of fresh air almost that I hadn't found. And it was like, oh my gosh, he's not even asking me about anything like sexual or making comments about my looks or my body or anything. It's very interested in like me and what I do and who I am as a person. And that stuff was nice. And, we kept talking and it was like, oh, we have actual like adult things in common. It's like, oh, this is how it should be. And that's kind of how I felt about it. And it just kind of took off from there.
How long did you two talk before you actually met in person?
So I had just left there. I had to come home for a wedding. We talked for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And then he asked me to come back out for the 4th of July. And I flew out there and met him for that. And we went and spent time on his family property. And that was when he said, oh, I told my parents that you're my girlfriend. And I said, oh, I didn't know. I didn't get that memo. And so, yeah, it all moved very quick. And it was kind of like week by week by week on things.
How did you feel when you found out he was telling people that you were his girlfriend without having asked you?
I remember exactly where we were exactly what we were doing. You know, it's like you don't ever forget these things. And I remember what we were talking about, and he just was saying it's such a big deal that we're here, that you are on the family. I mean, the family property was a very big deal to them. And he said it was his favorite place and all this stuff. And he said, it's such a big deal that you're here. You don't understand, you know, that we're alone here, that my parents let you be here. And that's when I said, you know, well, what did you tell them? Because to me, it's like we just had met and I was curious. I'm like, I don't know what I would tell my parents. And he said, you know, well, but you're my girlfriend. It was so casual, like, you know, and I said, I know I got a smile across my face, but it was almost kind of like, what? Like, wait, what? And he said, yeah, you know, that you're my girlfriend. And I said, do you know what that means? Kind of like I was very like, what are the rules of this? Like, do you know what that means? And he said, yeah. And we talked about it. And I obviously would have wanted that to be a conversation. It sounds weird to be like, ask me to be your girlfriend at like age in our 30s, whatever. But at the same time, it was just, told to me or put on me that I was this object, this thing. I was mixed because that's one side of like, you're this thing, I'm claiming you. But on the other hand, I was like, oh, this is so nice to not be like back and forth for months on end. And what are we? What do you want? And I just was like, okay. I felt the same. I felt those feelings towards him. I wish that there was a conversation, but I was glad that it wasn't back and forth for a long time. So at that point, I was so interested and happy that I wish it was done differently, but I wasn't super upset.
Listen to this. The Environmental Working Group found that 3 out of 4 homes in America have some pretty sketchy stuff in their tap water, which makes total sense because for the last 16 years that I've been with my husband, he's been joking that I'm like the little girl from Signs. Remember that movie? Because I can literally taste the difference between tap water and filtered water. Some would say it's a gift. I call it a curse because no matter where we are, whether it's a restaurant or a friend's place, I just can't bring myself to drink tap water. I'm always on a mission to find the good stuff, and that's why I love my AquaTrue. I can taste the difference it makes, and now my security water bottle that goes with me everywhere is always filled with tasty filtered water. That's why you've got to check out AquaTrue. Their purifiers use a 4-stage reverse osmosis purification process, and get this, their countertop purifiers work with no installation or plumbing. Thank goodness, because we do not need to add anything else to our to-do list these days. The filters remove 15 times more contaminants than ordinary pitcher filters and are specifically designed to combat chemicals like PFAS in your water supply. They have water filters that fit every type of home, from installation-free countertop purifiers, like I just mentioned, to higher capacity under sink options. They even have a Wi-Fi connected purifier and mineral boost options. Their filters are affordable and long-lasting. There's no changing filters every 2 to 3 months. Their filters last from 6 months to 2 years. Thank goodness. And best of all, you're going to save the environment from tons of plastic, because just one set of filters from their classic purifier makes the equivalent of 4,500 bottles of water. Not to mention, that's less than 3 cents a bottle, so you're saving money while you save the planet. AquaTrue has made such a difference for me, my husband, and our dog Arya. Honestly, we're living in a world where tap water is off the table, and I couldn't be more grateful. It's like we've leveled up in hydration, and I'm here for it. AquaTrue comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, and even makes a great gift. Today, Murder Diaries listeners receive 20% off any AquaTrue purifier. Just go to aquatrue.com, that's AQUATRU.com, and enter the code DIARIES at checkout. That's 20% off any AquaTrue water purifier when you go to aquatrue.com and use promo code DIARIES. That's DIARIES.
And let's remember at this time, while looking back, it's kind of like a hindsight red flag of, as you were mentioning, kind of put right onto you. And there was a little bit of shock value to it, which, let's be real, he probably got off a little bit on some of that shock value stuff. But it's also, let's remember what you were searching for at the time. So how relieving to have found a man who was going to, maybe at that time, it felt like, kind of step up and made you his girlfriend, and which, again, you were looking for a relationship. So there it was right in front of you. So why would one in that position feel like they would be wanting to acknowledge any kind of red flag or uncomfy feelings about it? Because you just got what you wanted. You should be excited, right? I mean, I can only imagine the self-talk that was going on for you at the time.
Yeah, that just brought up a point in my mind. I had Dr. Nadine on my show. She's the ex-wife of the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, and she's amazing. She is total expert in trauma bonds and complex PTSD, all this stuff. But she was talking to me about, and I don't mean to get ahead, but just for this one point, how she talks about mind mapping. And I was telling her about stuff in my story. And she goes, oh, well, that's, how they do mind mapping. And I said, what do you mean by mind mapping? And she goes, well, you give them all your values. You tell them everything that's important to you. You kind of serve it up on a platter. And then later on, they know how to pull that up and bring that up and evoke certain emotions with you, or, serve up things to you that are going to bring up those traits or those things that you're looking for. And I just think about this and I'm like, he obviously knew that. And I talked about this so much because I was always so clear on, I'm looking for a commitment. I'm looking for someone who's going to show up. I don't want drama. I don't want, X, Y, Z. And he did show up and give that to me on a platter, whether it was for the right reasons or not, whatever. But that was just instance number one of kind of when and where it started, which is interesting. So much on that, I think.
So now that he has claimed you as his girlfriend, or, this conversation comes up, this 4th of July at the family's property happens, where do you go from here in terms of relationship? Because like you said, you did go home. And so you're from Oregon originally, but you went out to Montana because you wanted a fresh start and just to kind of have that experience there. And you happened to meet him. Where do you go from here after that initial 4th of July meeting with this relationship?
Yeah. So we were together. I remember, friends texted and said, how's it going? And I sent them a photo of us. I said, because he said after that, he said, let's take a photo and send it to my parents. And so we had a photo then. And I remember I sent it to my friends who asked, and I said, I have a boyfriend. Sent it to my friends and everyone was like, oh my gosh, you look so in love. You just look so happy. And I was happy, but that was also just, took me all the way up to the highest of highs. And then I think everything just kind of started in terms of sexual abuse. Definitely started that weekend prior to me leaving, but in such a confusing way. Where also, again, now this is your partner. This is a new relationship. I think that there was a lot of confusion on my end around that and what that looked like. That kind of had started. And then I went home. Yes, back to Oregon. And then back within a week, I was going back out he invited me on a family trip. So I was going back out for that. I met his family, everyone. It was a huge kind of family reunion thing. So I went out and did that. And things just kind of escalated from there. Our relationship was good, but there were things that I was struggling with in terms of definitely sexual abuse that was pushing my boundaries on what I was comfortable with. We had things going on in that I was not okay with.
Within your comfort level, can you expand a little bit on the confusion part of the abuse that began and what that meant? Of course, again, within your comfort level, you don't have to go into the details of exactly what happened.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I talk about this a lot, especially episode 2 on my show. I share very in detail, but he had done some things previously over the 4th of July weekend that confused me in an intimate setting that just weren't what I had ever experienced before, but reassured me, it's fine. And I have your back if anything happens, but it just felt odd. And then fast forward to this weekend with the family, a few things started happening. First was biting during sex, which in all this, my kind of banner statement is if you consent to any of this and if this is your thing, if you're into any of this, totally fine. I'm not here to shame anyone with anything that you're into in an intimate setting. This was not ever anything that we had discussed, that I consented to, that, anything along those lines. And so I think that if that happens, then that's a whole other topic of conversation. And that's kind of where we landed, where these things happened and were done. And I was shocked and surprised would bring it up. And it was kind of shrugged off. And then wouldn't happen a few times, then would come back and happen again at a greater level. And so I started becoming left with like bruises all over during his family trip, to the point of like, I need you to put cover up on me. And I think that's one point where the confusion started, because A, it's done in an intimate manner, and this is a newer relationship, kind of figuring out what that looks like for us. But it's not something I want. It's not something I'm comfortable with, and trying to figure out what that is like.
And that's the important takeaway right there, is it's not necessarily always what the act is that makes it abuse or not. It has to do with consent and being comfortable with it at that time. And I so appreciate that, because that really is the key takeaway there.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that has helped me a ton is no one gets to tell you that they did not cause harm to you or didn't hurt you if you feel like they did, or if you feel like it happened. And I think that was something too, where it was like, oh no, I love you so much. I'm so in love with you. This is great. We're having so much fun. And I was left like looking at myself in the mirror saying, I don't recognize myself. This is not me, and his sister at one point in time said, how'd you get those bruises? And I just remember being mortified, totally like an moment, like someone recognizes and sees it. And what do I say? This is her brother. And it's so isolating. But that's where the confusion comes in. That's, part of it. And it's done in a way of love and intimacy, and it's behind closed doors. But it's saying it's not at all what you see in terms of quote unquote abuse and violence and all this stuff. But it was a cycle that we got into, and it just escalated and escalated. And then there was more happening during that trip in terms of sexual abuse, in terms of things that I wasn't comfortable with and wouldn't consent to, and things with him kind of being dependent or having dependencies and not being kind of himself at that time. That was confusing. And alcohol is never an excuse for anything, but that kind of made things murky at times. And so you just kind of walk away, and I think you're like, what just happened? And it's so hard to rectify that. But my thing is, I started to identify kind of the cycle of we're doing really good, and then something would happen, and I would ask him to address it. He wouldn't really address it. Never really get a sorry. You'd kind of get like oh, oops, or like, it is what it is. And then go into like a totally like, I love you so much, kind of a love bombing honeymoon. And then it would eventually come back around, and we kind of got into this cycle. And I think that's kind of where we went from there, and it escalated after that trip as well throughout our relationship. But that's kind of where things started going in terms of abuse, I guess you can say. But I did not recognize it at all. I mean, I was like, I love him so much. This is great. We just have things that are making me uncomfortable, but we need to work on them and address them. And it's done in such a covert way. And that's what's hard. I think that's what keeps you stuck and in it longer.
Well, it sounds like he was making you question your reality, with you saying, oh, I don't like that. And him saying, but I love you. I would never do anything to hurt you. That must have been so difficult. Even if you didn't realize what was happening, it sounds like somewhere deep down, you knew something wasn't right.
Yeah, I mean, your gut knows. And I say this, and I think going back to at the very start, talking about how my past kind of primed me for this, is like my body, I'm so in tune with my body. Wish I wasn't sometimes, but after decades of this chronic health stuff, it's like my body, I know it in and out. And so, yeah, you can't run from it. And that's the one thing I've learned throughout this, is that you can put on as much cover up as you want. You can put on smiles. You can go and do everything. But at the end of the day, your body knows when something is not right. And whether it comes out right then or months and months later or years and years later, or whatever, it's going to come out. And I think, people can look at this and say, oh, well, it was quick, or you weren't together that long, or whatever. And my thing is like, I don't care if you're with someone and something happens and it's 90 seconds long, or if the abuse that happens is 9 days or 9 months or years or whatever. Like, your body doesn't know time with it. And so whether something happens to you instantaneously or over time, the impact is there. And so no one can ever take that away from you and what happens to you. And I think that there's this thing that, like, I've had a hard time with this, is that, oh, it's not the same as other people, or it wasn't as bad because It wasn't, what we see on TV, or it wasn't this or that, but it's like, this is in my body and will be in my body for such a long time. I don't even know how long. Like how long. I've asked people, I'm like, how long until this is gone? So I'm such a timeline person, but it's in there and your body knows. There's books like The Body Keeps Score and stuff. It takes a long time for these things to get out of your system and your nervous system and everything. And so abuse lives on for much longer than we think or than we see. And I think that that's just something to make note of, is that it's a lot quicker than a moment. And that's what I wish a lot of people knew about it.
I always say too, and I feel like you were touching on this in that point, that everything is relative. So things that happen to you, depending on your previous life experience, you're going to feel things are maybe hard that are easy for somebody. That could even be down to a sport, right? It just depends. Have you been practicing a lot? That might be easier for you than somebody else, or vice versa. So why wouldn't certain traumas kind of be that same way, right? But also to not take away from the fact that TV and movies are completely different as well. So we have this warped idea of like, well, was that really abuse, or was that really... It kind of just has to come down to going with your gut and your nervous system and what it's making you feel. If something makes you feel uncomfortable, then you are uncomfortable. Somebody else might be comfortable doing it. Let's even just take jumping off a cliff into water. I would not feel comfortable doing that. But somebody who's a bit more of a daredevil thrill seeker, they're going to be like, oh, heck yeah, that doesn't scare me. I can do that, no problem. Things are relative. So it's such a great point that with certain trauma and certain things that you are or aren't comfortable with or may go through, they are going to be different. So you can't just judge, well, yours wasn't as long as mine, or yours wasn't as tough as mine, or, that sort of thing. I mean, what somebody is feeling, if it was wrong, it was wrong. If it was trauma, period.
And jumping on to what Paige was saying, and obviously what you were saying, Allyn, just because your story may not look exactly the way TV portrays it, your story is essential for people who are listening, because they may experience the same things or something similar in their lives and may not understand that there's a name for it, or there's something wrong that's going on. Maybe they don't have the understanding to realize what they're experiencing isn't right. That's why I'm so grateful that you're willing to share your story and willing to get vulnerable with us to help others.
Yeah, no, of course. There's so many things that I did not understand this world, or have even an entrance into this world prior to this at all. And it's kind of, I know Jake Deptula, he made the comment to me, he's kind of like, oh, it's like, baptism by fire with all this. Like, you don't want it, obviously, but you're just kind of dropped into it. And I think that is what it is. And I didn't know terms for any of this. I didn't even identify it as what it was at the time. And I still wrestle with it a lot. And I think that that's something too, is that you're going to wrestle with it a lot. And I think that if you are, then that's another sign too. And as someone coming out of it, is that that's kind of the calculated confusion as well, is like, oh, well, I still have love, but I'm confused. And that's kind of the mental aspect of abuse as well. And I've wrestled with that too, and really found myself for a long time even still protecting him. And I think people struggle with that as well. It's kind of the trauma bond side of things, but trauma bond 70% is not good, 30% is great, love bomb-y, honeymoon. And so that's kind of where you waver. And I get that with people too, and I had it firsthand, is that, 70% of the time is this, and it's hard, and it's not at all what you envision a relationship to be. And then 30% of the time they come back with a hug and a kiss and a like, I love you so much. It's great. And so it keeps you stuck. It keeps you confused, and it keeps you staying in it longer. There is so much confusion, but it's done in such a calculated way. And I think when you can come out of it or hear more about it or learn even a little bit about it, then you can kind of understand that. Because if not, then you're in this cycle of feeling like, you're doing something wrong, or this is happening for a reason that you did, or something like that. And it just keeps you stuck, which no one deserves to be stuck in that.
As you were going through this cycle and you were getting stuck and love bombed and just abused over and over, what was the moment that made you realize you needed to leave? And then what led to that decision?
Yes. So I did not leave. I was left, which is the biggest blessing ever, and an interesting plot twist in this. Something that, we could go on and on forever about is that throughout all of this, and kind of another aspect of his kind of coercive control and manipulation, is that his ex became more present throughout our relationship, and kind of a third party in things. It just became present that she was still around in some capacity and throughout time, that she was more and more involved. And what I mean is, you're dating someone who's single, and he always said he was single, but then it was like, oh, she has things to pick up, and oh, she's going to stay for a little bit because she found out about you and I can't get her off the lease. And the goalpost always changed. And that's kind of a common thing in narcissistic relationships. But I was so devoted to this relationship. I knew things were not right. I had made a pro-con list, which is so true to me. Like, what am I doing making a pro-con list? But I had reached that point where I was like, oh, it's really grinding on me. But I, again, was from this point of view that, like, you don't just leave because things aren't great. And again, I felt like things are odd and weird and I'm not comfortable with certain things, but it wasn't, he hadn't come up and smacked me in the face or done blatant signs of abuse that I had seen. And so I never saw it for that. I never saw it for what it was. And I hadn't told family or friends or anything. I think I had told them kind of about his ex being present, but I hadn't disclosed to anyone any of the other stuff that was going on, even my therapist, because I just thought it was us kind of figuring out our intimate life together, honestly. And I was like, we'll figure it out, kind of, even though it's really odd. That's kind of where we were at with that. But I was like, we will make it work and figure it out. And I just felt like, and it had been discussed that I was going to make a move out there. And this had been discussed for a long time. And so there's just a lot of weight laying on things. And anyways, I was out there. I was supposed to be making a move that month. And I had gone out and I just got a random text from him. I had dinner ready, everything. I was house sitting for someone about 10 minutes away from him. And he said, essentially, I think I need some time. I got into this too quickly and I need some time. And I just dropped to the floor and I was just shocked. At this point, he had proposed. We were engaged. We had plans like kids' names, kids, our families. Like we're so integrated at this point, and I was so attached and bonded to him. So he said that, and I just dropped, and I called him, and he didn't answer. And I looked at his location. His location was gone, and he was just gone. And I texted him again. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Is this a breakup? And he said, I think that's for the best right now. And that was the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me, even though I just felt like I died. It was just complete. The earth fell out from underneath me and I was out there by myself, and it was annoying. You have no answers. I just had no idea what just happened.
When you think about a successful business, like Only Murders in the Building star Selena Gomez's Rare Beauty, sure, you think about an in-demand product that's high quality, that has scary good marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually a business behind the business, making selling and buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet and the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%. This means way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So if you want to grow your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling and strolling. On the web, of course, in your store, in your feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret that the businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Rare Beauty uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/murderdiaries, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/murderdiaries to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/murderdiaries. It doesn't sound like it, but looking back, were there any clues that a breakup might be coming? Besides this ex just continuing to come into the fold here and be present. Again, looking back, were there any clues that maybe that text was coming? Because it does sound like it was out of the blue, but again, just using hindsight.
Yeah, no, not at all. We had talked on the phone the night before and he was not in a good mood, but I had gotten that, a little bit before. And it was odd because usually he, it's always very like, what's mine is yours. And I had said, I know you've had a long day at work. I just have a quick question. Like, I'd always just kind of made myself smaller. Like, I'm just like, hey, like me, I'm in the corner. I just have a quick question. And I said, I am going to fly in. And my plan is that I'm going to Uber to your house and get the truck. And then I'm going to go get us food for the weekend, get us all set up. And then when you're done, you can come over and I'll have dinner, everything. And I remember he said, I don't want you driving the truck anymore. And it just I was like, what? Like it was very, I've not been doing it the duration of our relationship, but every time for the most part. And I always, returned it filled up, washed, vacuumed, all nice. And I don't ever want to assume that anything's mine, but it was always this narrative of like, whatever you need. So I said, I just want to make sure that's okay. And he said, I don't want you driving it anymore. Almost like a parent, like you've messed something up. And so I just was like, did I do something? And he said, no, I just don't think it's a good idea anymore, but didn't give me any. And I said, are you okay? And, he just long day. And I just, I'm just not in the mood right now. And that caught me off guard. And I just felt kind of hurt by that. And I said, you know what? I'll figure out my own stuff. I'll talk to you tomorrow. So I didn't talk to him at all that night. And that just felt off. But it was not the first time. Historically, his communication would kind of go erratic. Now, hindsight, obviously, I know why. But that was like the one blip that I could look back and say. But even that, I couldn't look back and say, oh, I know he's going to break up with me tomorrow. It wasn't even a fight. It was just a weird, like, you were kind of not nice. I don't know why, but there was no inkling. And when it happened, I'd been talking to his sister. I was in a group text with her and her friends and sharing recipes about dinner. And I remember I called her and I said, I think your brother just broke up with me. And she said, there's no way. There's absolutely no way. And it was in between when I had texted him and asked if it was a breakup. And so I didn't know for sure. And she said, Allyn, there's no way. She said, he's so in love with you. We've never seen him like this. Like, you are part of our family. She said, there's absolutely no way. And so, it took everyone by surprise.
Well, and you're literally engaged. So you would think that it would take something pretty big to break up.
And more than a random text. Yeah. So no, I didn't at all. So I was just shocked at the whole thing.
Now that he's sent these texts and has essentially broken up with you, ended the engagement, what is the process like for you? You're now in another state. I believe when we talked last time, you had mentioned that you actually had all of your things moved from Oregon to Montana already.
Oh, I had all the, I had Amazon, like all my ring deliveries. They were all coming to my house at that time. I was in the process. Nothing had been shipped, like, again, thank you, God. But, it was in the process. And so it was a God moment. I think after that, it was just a snowball effect of finding out more and more truths about him and the extent of everything. And he essentially, what I came to find is that he was still fully with his other girlfriend, not ex, whatever narrative wording we go with that.
The one who was on the lease, that's in quotes.
Yes.
Okay.
So she sent me a Facebook message the following day and said, I have answers if you'd like them, so cryptic again. And I had nothing to lose. And I just replied. Throughout that, I came to find that, she said, we've been together 4+ years. I just found your letter in his truck the other day and I confronted him about it. He said that he broke up with you, that his family forced him to be with you, and that he never was into it. Is this all true? And just jabs you where it hurts the whole time. And she had photos and timelines and everything that you can't ignore. It's not true. And I just was in shock. And I remember I called and apologized to her. and she was very calm about it. She was not surprised or anything, and she just wanted details. Over time, we talked more and more, and our timelines were just like puzzle perfect, how they matched up in terms of, he dropped me at the airport. He'd go and pick her up, or I would send him pictures of our weekend, and he would only send her pictures of him that I took, not the ones of us together or whatever. And so just stuff like that. I mean, he, at the end of the day, was with both of us, and then also cheated on both of us with dozens of other women that came out through a Facebook group, all of that information as well. And he called me one more time when he knew that I was talking to her, and he said, I want to see you face to face. And it's just such a tactic.
He wanted that control back.
He did.
I wish I could tell you about my high school boyfriend. I'll save that for another day, but I'll be telling you all about that.
Okay. Yes. It's totally like, oh, it's out in the open. And so he came over and he looked different to me. He just was different, and he couldn't look at me. He sat adjacent to me, didn't say anything. And I said, is this true that you cheated on both of us? And he said, yes. And I said, and you cheated on both of us with all these other women. And he kind of, mumbled, fumbled. And I said, is it true? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. And I said, and he got up and had alligator tears and got his tissue and everything. And I said, you've devastated both of our families. I don't know how you could do this. And he didn't really have anything to say. And, he got up and he left, and I watched him drive away. That was the last time I ever saw him. He texted me the following morning, saying that he loved me and that it wasn't fake for him, and how it hurts that I was believing the lies about him. But he also understands because he lied to me. And it was all right there. It was like, you just said that you lied to me. And I kind of ripped off a text saying just that you're a nasty, evil person. I don't want anything to do with you. And that was the last time that I had ever saw him, ever talked to him or anything. And it's just been kind of moving on and trying to heal since then. It's been going a lot better. But I mean, it took the life out of me full force. So that has been that experience. But I mean, the aftermath of that is just learning more about these things. I wasn't even aware of intimate partner violence until I went and was talking to my therapist or kind of reporting on some things. And this was brought up to me. And I was like, I don't even know that term. I don't even know what that looks like. And I remember I Googled the definition, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is me and what happens. And so it's just been really eye-opening. I think, you go through, and like we kind of minimize what we go through, and then you walk out of it and you're like, oh my gosh, I was, just walked through fire for however many months, and you come out of it and you realize what it is, and just eye-opening. So that was that. And ever since then, I've just been kind of on a mission to heal myself, but also talk about it to other people, just because I think it happens so often. I mean, it's 1 in 3 women who will go through this in their lifetime. And we kind of say that's 1 in 3 women who are willing and able to talk about it too. And so I think it impacts far, far more households than even the statistics represent. And so just raising awareness for that.
It's something that's so hard to measure too, because in even just this case, there's no arrest. It's not that kind of story, even though there were horrific things that happened that you wish somebody could be reprimanded appropriately for. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that somebody also receives some kind of rehabilitation, but that's just not what happened. So it goes so underreported and just unreported in general, because what would you have been allowed to report? Maybe certain instances of what you explained when the abuse began, but even then, would it have been a slap on the wrist? It's very hard to prove these things that happen. And we already have this notion of it's almost like guilty until proven innocent when you're making claims like that against somebody. And that makes it even worse and is a huge reason why people don't report certain things that might be of an arrestable nature. And then it sounds like in your case too, he really knew how to ride that line just to keep things going, keep you going, do that mind mapping of knowing exactly where to trigger, but ride that line of like, nothing's ever going to happen to me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I did have a report that was filed, and it just, I mean, that's a whole other episode to talk about too. And it becomes a he said, she said, and it's so hard on the survivor side of how much do you want to go for and go after, and what do you do? And it's a confusing process. in and of itself to go for. And so as much as, you want something on the record to reflect that, I think it's just very, very hard. But on your guys' side also, and kind of what you're doing with your show, I think it needs to be talked about, just because, you have the 1 in 3 women who will experience these things, but then there's the 1 in 5 women who are eventually killed by an intimate partner. And so just statistically, I think, and also if there's a gun or weapon in the house, your numbers go up by 20, or you're 20 times more likely to be killed by an intimate partner. And there's all these kind of statistics with that, but I think it's just important to get it out there, and why people don't report and everything too.
The statistics are absolutely staggering, and it's heartbreaking, but it's amazing that women like yourself are willing to come out and talk about stories like these. Like you said, no matter how dramatic and obvious the things that happened were, or shocking, versus this is what happened and I had no idea. They're just as important to talk about. So we thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And I know you mentioned that on your podcast, you are going through your story even in more detail, and obviously have even more great things to say. So can you remind them where they can find your podcast and where they can find you?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I am on Instagram. It is at Allyn, Allyn.Amerongen, Amerongen. And the show is When Heaven Meets Hell, and it is available on all streaming platforms for podcasts. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey with us. I really believe that your story is going to inspire others to seek help, or at least find their own paths to healing. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Make sure to follow us on all of our socials at The Murder Diaries Pod, and subscribe today to listen ad-free and check out our journal entry episodes. Until then,
Stay safe.
bye.